This is Fountain Pendulum. I'm going to share with you my fountain pen collection for 2024. And I'm very pleased with the developments I've been able to make with my fountain pen collection this year. Some really good curating and experiencing new pens and nibs, and really being able to further explore what is a best fitting fountain pen and nib for me. So this was a really good year. I'm excited to show some of the new fountain pens I've gotten, some of the new grinds I've gotten on previously owned fountain pens of mine. And I'd like to start off by visiting the pens that I've had from last year that have been rehomed with new owners. So I did a fountain pen collection video last year at the end of 2023. So feel free to watch that if you want to check out what the previous nibs were on some of these fountain pens, as well as some of the pens that I've let go. So let's start with the pens that have been rehomed. First, we have the Pilot Custom 823 in amber. I got this fountain pen previously owned. It had a medium nib with a cursive italic grind on it. So I liked the pen and I liked the grind, so I decided to go ahead and get it. And it was nice. It's extremely comfortable pen, but the grind just wasn't a favorite with me. I like cursive italics, but this one, just something about the writing experience. So I went ahead and got it reground by a different nibmeister with a similar grind, a cursive italic basically. But it still just never really clicked for me. So as much as I liked the look of the amber transparent resin, the fun of having a vac filler, and the phenomenal comfort of the Custom 823, I just wasn't reaching for it enough and I didn't love it. So that got rehomed. Next was a Sailor Pro Gear Autumn Sky with a zoom nib. And this I got previously owned as well. It was my first Sailor. Really liked the color. I thought it was lovely. I had no intention of using a zoom nib. Way too broad and just not interesting enough for me personally. So I had a hybrid architect done on that with a reverse extra fine. And the grind was phenomenal. I really liked it, but I wasn't reaching enough for it because it just wasn't as practical a pen or grind rather than it could have been. So as fun as it was to write with, I just wasn't using it enough. If I were to do it over, I probably would have done a reverse architect. So where the ultra extra fine was on the standard side, getting better ink flow, and the hybrid architect side of the grind on the reverse. That way it just makes it a little bit more practical, because what I found was happening was the ultra extra fine nib wasn't getting as good of an ink flow on the reverse side. I found the Sailor Pro Gear size to be extremely comfortable, really liked that, but again, I just wasn't using it enough to warrant keeping it in my collection for me personally. So this pen was rehomed as well. Next was a Leonardo Memento Zero, the standard size in Irid. Very beautiful coloring, lovely, gorgeous pen. I got it in a steel nib with a fine. I bought it previously owned, but it came brand new actually, so that was kind of nice. And I just didn't really fall in love with this pen. The color was beautiful, but it didn't really captivate me enough. I didn't find the pen very comfortable. The step down's a bit too significant for my hand particularly. And the fine nib, it wasn't a great writing experience for me. I think it was kind of dry and it just more broad than ideal for me. I probably would have experienced an extra fine more to my liking. But again, mostly for the comfort, I wasn't finding this pen comfortable enough for longer writing sessions, and so I was happy to rehome it to a very happy home. Next is my Pineider Avatar Deluxe in Neptune Blue with a extra fine 14 karat quill nib, and I really loved this pen. It was my first Pineider magnetic cap. It wrote absolutely beautifully. I loved this nib. A nice amount of feedback, but also so smooth and bouncy. It was a delight to write with. And the reason I decided to rehome this one was because I was looking to fund another Pineider. So I just didn't really need two Pineiders, so I wanted to get something that was a little bit more girthy, and so that's what I did. And it got rehomed with a great owner. So let us move on to the 2024 collection, what I have in hand, in person on my desk. And we're going to go 5 pens at a time. Some of these are pens I've had without alteration. Some are pens I've had with modified nibs. And some are brand new to me, which of course for me personally are the most exciting, although grinds can be quite excellent also. So let's start here, and I'm going to show 5 at a time, starting with what I've had in my collection the longest, and moving kind of like that. So here is a Parker 45. I really love the clip. I like the bi-color, like the steel and the gold. I don't care so much this plastic black bit. This was given to me, handed down from a family friend. It has a steel fine nib, and this one is rather an archived pen. I don't use it. I don't enjoy writing with it very much, but because it was a gift, I'm happy to keep it. But I actually have a restoration video that I did on this, so if that's of interest to you, you can find a writing sample there as well. If it was an extra fine, I probably would use it more, but it's still just not a very comfortable pen, nor is the nib an interesting experience for me personally. So it's just one of those pens that I'm happy to have, but it's kind of in the archive. It's not being actively used. Next is, let's actually go here, my Pilot Falcon. And this was my first purchased fountain pen once, or beginning my hobby, I should say. Black resin, lovely clip. I got this in a soft fine. Love the nib on that. And I have had a custom grind done on this. So it has a cursive italic now and added flex. So I'm going to go ahead and do a writing sample with this. This is Clairefontaine paper, 90 grams. It's just the notebook that I had handy. So Pilot Falcon. So originally this was a soft fine, and since has been ground to a cursive italic and added flex. So that's kind of with the standard writing. I can show you with some flex. So standard, and it's a beautiful grind and really very fun to write with. There, I pushed it to the max there. And the ink I have in here is the Endless Alchemy Drops of Mars. It's a really nice wet red. So that is the Pilot Falcon. Next we have the Pilot Vanishing Point. This is in the matte black, and I originally got this with a stub nib, and what's new this year is I bought another nib unit for it, so the same black coloring of the nib in extra fine to add more usability to it, because the stub nib I really liked, or I quite liked, I would say. That's another one that I've been on the fence about grinding to something more crisp, but it gets a lot more use in an extra fine. So let's check out the writing sample for that. Pilot Vanishing Point, capless, matte black. These are 18 karat, extra fine. And this has the Pelikan Ink of the Year for 2024, Pelikan Edelstein, Golden Lapis. I just didn't shake the bottle, so no shimmer on this. Here is a writing sample that I've already had of the Vanishing Point with the stub nib, so that's a 1.0 millimeter, and that's how it looks. Next is this beauty. It's a vintage pen. It's a Montblanc, and this is the 221. There's a lot of beautiful details that I really love about this pen. The clip is one of them. It's very angular and unique. I love the taper on the band saying 221, and it doesn't show the very best on camera or in person for that matter, but this is a dark green, and it's a little bit more difficult to come by in this coloring. It's a snap cap, has a little ink window on it, and a beautiful inlaid nib. I love the cutouts along there and the length. And this pen, as I mentioned, is a vintage, so the nib is beautifully bouncy and it has a really unique shape to it. I have a video on this pen also, so you can get some close-up looks at the nib if that's of interest. But let's go ahead. This has it had a fine nib, and it's been ground. I wanted an extra fine, but again, these are kind of hard to come by, and then there's the whole process of swapping it, like getting rid of one pen and getting another. So I decided it was a tough call to grind a vintage pen, but I decided to go ahead, and I don't regret it. I got a Gochu grind on this, Gochu grind, and I'll show you the writing sample. Fine, and it now has a gochu grind on it. And I think the reverse is like an looks like a, this is a needle point, I think. It does get not very much ink. So the gochu grind is really cool. It was by JC, the nib tailor, but you get some line variation, which I really enjoy. And I really like this in cursive. It reminds me of like brush strokes a bit. But it would be, you know, a bit similar to, this is a 14 karat gold nib also. And I have Waterman, Serenity Blue. A little backstory on this was, at the time, I was looking at an E95S, and you can see that there are some similarities. Being a vintage, it's a bit smaller, not quite pocket-sized, but a compact slim pen. And it's a snap cap. And yeah, I liked the feedback I was hearing about the E95S, how the nib was bouncy and it was inlaid, and the vintage look was kind of cool. But while I was considering this, I came across this pen, and this really checked more of the boxes for me as far as aesthetic and actually being a vintage pen, and not just a vintage inspired pen like the Pilot E95S's. And I really love that I got this, because it's, as far as the nib writing experience, it's phenomenal. The pen is rather lean, but I still really like it. Next up is a very special pen to me. This is the Stipula Etruria WT. Stipula and Etruria is the model, WT is the material. And as far as this aesthetic goes, this is my favorite pen. It is rather vintage, not very, and it's celluloid. This is a numbered edition, so this is my first numbered edition that I ever got, my first celluloid pen too. And I just think it's absolutely beautiful and stunning. It gives a very artesian look. And the celluloid is so gorgeous. You can see the little flecks of green in there. And the clip and band are sterling silver. It's a very nice girth, very comfortable. And I did a nib swap on this, actually. Originally, it came with an 18 karat 1.3 millimeter stub or italic. And I loved that nib. It's bicolored, it's gorgeous, but it wasn't getting as much use. So I sought out another Stipula nib and was super happy to find this. This is a titanium, so titanium nib. And it came in like a fine medium, and I've had this ground as well. So let's do the writing sample. Yeah, it's so comfortable. Look how nicely it fits in the hand. I love how this is beveled. The only thing that I don't care about this pen, care for, is I find the threads a little bit sharp, and that when you don't want to over tighten, but when I tighten the cap, sometimes it loosens on its own. Other than that, this pen is pretty near perfect for me. Aesthetic, writing, enjoyability, all that. So titanium. So this came in like a fine medium, and I've had it ground to an extra fine, which I enjoy much more. The other thing to note also is this was marketed as a titanium flex nib, which you can squeeze out some flex. I can flex it more than that, but I've gotten this nib tuned right where I like it, and sometimes when you flex it, if you're not giving due diligence to doing it very responsibly, you can mess up the tuning. So I'm not interested in doing that. I really don't flex it when I write anymore, but I really enjoy the softness and the bounce of the titanium nib. Here is a writing sample of the Stipula 18 karat 1.3 millimeter italic. It came kind of a stub italic, and I had it ground into a more crisp italic, which I really enjoy. So this writing sample and the one I did previously were both Waterman Serenity Blue. Alright, we're on to our next tray, and there'll be several of these till we get through the entire collection. Which, by the way, this is a Purpleheart 5-pen rest in the jewel style. I make fountain pen and ink desk accessories made of solid wood. Some are exotic woods, which this one is Purpleheart. If that's something you're interested in, check out the link below, where I'll link to my web store. Everything's solid wood and completely handmade by me. So let's talk about the next pen. Next up is this Pelikan M400. This is a vintage also, and I love the coloring on these vintage ones. It's on this one particularly, it's brown, but it's a little bit more like random, and it is transparent or semi-transparent, so you can see through. It's a piston filler, and it has a really delightful bouncy nib on it. So I'm going to show you the writing sample for this Pelikan. This is the brown tortoise. And this came with a medium nib, say 14 karat medium, and it's since been ground into a italic. And originally, this is a new grind for this one as well, because originally it was broader, so now I have it ground down to, I believe it's a 0.7 millimeter, because it was still too broad for my everyday writing. And it's beautiful and crisp, but this is a very bouncy nib, so it really softens the feel of the italic, at least to me. And these vintage nibs have a beautiful bounce to them. Look at that line variation that you can accomplish. And this is also inked with Waterman Serenity Blue. Some of these pens I had inked already, and the ones that I didn't, I inked them with Waterman Serenity Blue to give a accurate representation of the nib. But the ones that I had inked already, I didn't really feel the need to unink them and re-ink them again. Next we have this little treasure. This was a pen I happened upon at a pen show. It was already used, and it's also a vintage. This is a Visconti Viscontina, and this has the Arco celluloid, sterling silver bands and clip, and it's definitely pocket-sized also. Kind of a burgundy Arco or red Arco celluloid on it, and it's just darling. This is a numbered edition as well. Cute, adorable nib, and I do think the nib is a very generous size given the size of the pen itself being pocket sized. Came in a medium. I had it ground into an Architect, and look at this. It's a push-pull. It's attached. It doesn't come attached, but look at the push handle is the matching celluloid. Isn't that darling? So I'm incredibly fond of this pen. I think it was such a cute little find, and it writes phenomenally. So let's take a look. I remember when I came across this pen, I didn't even know such a thing existed. I'm so glad it does. So this came with a medium, and I've had it ground to an Architect. Am I doing this? Architect. Yeah, I was on the right track. It's an Architect RT. And then on the reverse is a rather scratchy extra fine. Be nice to get that fixed. So excellent line variation. I would say originally when I got this done, I would have liked a even smaller Architect, but now I don't know, I kind of like it, and I'm kind of used to it, and I don't really want to change it, at least for now. So I really enjoy it. It's a really good writer, and the Architect is dynamite. This is also by the Nib Tailor, and this is inked with Ferris wheel press grape ice pop, and this is a very wet, or I should say quite wet nib, and I think the ink's been in there a bit, so it's a little darker than it usually is. Next is this fountain pen. It's kind of a funky one. This is a MaJohn T1, and I got it with a very specific purpose in mind. So this is brass. It's quite cap heavy, clear acrylic barrel, piston filler, very heavy, and grip section, and I think the back are brass also. But the purpose that I got this specific fountain pen is, it came with a Fude and a fine, I believe, steel nib, which I never use. But I got it to house this BlueDew nib that I had been wanting to try for a very long time. And I wasn't very inclined to getting a BlueDew fountain pen, but I wanted to try their nibs. Sorry, but that's what it is. So, yeah, let's give this a run. And my apologies, but I do not know. I'm just going to tell you now, I have no idea what ink this is. And then the BlueDew. This is a steel I want to show you when you don't write with pressure how fine these lines are. And the really cool thing about the BlueDew steel nib is it doesn't rust or corrode or anything like that. And then let's have some fun with the flexing here. Look at that beast. The comparison between the fineness and the broad flex strokes are amazing. And it's a very controlled yet responsive nib. So I really like it. It's definitely not an everyday writer. I'm actually not very fond of the fountain pen, like the MaJohn T1 fountain pen. I would prefer something else. I think that my biggest beef with it is the cap and that it leaks a bit sometimes, but I think that's because I'm like rehousing a nib that doesn't belong in it, probably. So yeah, it's a fun one. Once you start writing with it, I just kind of get carried away sometimes. Alright, next we have another Pelikan, another vintage. This is a really lovely one. This one I specifically bought because of the nib. It's not what I thought it was going to be, but it turned out to be a really phenomenal nib. So this is the M250 with marble blue. It has an ink window and a vintage 14 karat extra fine nib, but let me get something to block this. Look at that nib. That is the in-house nib, and it looks like an architect. This is the thing I love about vintage nibs. They had so much personality. Can't wait to show you how it writes. So the story behind this one was that I had tried a 1950s Pelikan extra fine and really liked it. And I was looking for something similar, but I wasn't being attentive enough to the year because this was not from the 50s. This one I think, I actually have no idea when this one was from, but it's not from the 50s. If you know, let me know. Sorry about that, my paper wasn't flush. Okay, so blue, marbled blue, blue marble, not sure, extra fine. I haven't done a thing to this nib, not a thing. This is completely from Pelikan stock. First of all, it doesn't write like you would think an extra fine should write, but that architect characteristic is so interesting, so curious to me. And I love writing with this pen. Absolutely love it. Isn't that fun? Next up is quite a modern looking pen and different from anything I'd ever gotten before. But I saw, this is a Keras Penco pen, and I saw them at a pen show, and I remember it looked very comfortable. And I picked it up. It's a snap cap, which I love because there's no threads. And look at the kind of, what would you call that, like fluting transition? So I remember picking it up and being like, this is such a comfortable pen. But it wasn't this one. It was like a brown one. So from then on, I thought to myself, I'm gonna get one of those sometime. And I tried the titanium extra fine there at their table, and I was like, and that's the nib I'm gonna get. So then I believe it was at the end of the year last year, I got this. So it's white, it's a Vertex model, so snap cap, and white Delrin. It's an industrial material, kind of like Ultim, but not. And a metal olive grip section. They actually have different colors of grip sections, so I got an extra one in, I think it's called Coke bottle. It's like a transparent turquoisey, kind of like a Coke, like a vintage Coke bottle. So I use that one in the summertime. But I love the way this titanium nib writes. Let's take a look. I was trying to do this. There we go. A Vertex model, white Delrin, and then titanium, extra fine. I love the feedback that you get with these titanium nibs. It's a Bach nib, and this is also Waterman Serenity Blue. I don't remember if this reverse writes. It does. Very nicely, actually. I forget about that. It's a really good reverse writer. And though there's softness to like some degree with these titanium nibs, not really much to speak of, not more than a gold for sure. All right, next tray. We have a Pelikan M400 in white tortoise. I literally bought this pen because she's so beautiful. I don't care for modern Pelikan nibs, but what I discovered is that the M400, this modern one, and my vintage one, and the M250 all have the same structure of nib unit, so I can interchange the nibs between all of them. So I don't like this nib really at all. I think it's beautiful. I guess that's the thing I like about it. But I really bought it because I think the pen is so beautiful. I love the color. I love the colors that this encourages me to use, like the Sailor Moroccan Mint Tea, those kind of beautiful. I really like that too. It's very pretty. So yeah, it's kind of a... So this came with an extra fine, and it was very broad, and I didn't really enjoy the writing experience. It got ground, and now it's finer. So let's take a look. Pelikan M400, a white tortoise. Originally an extra fine and ground to an extra fine, I would say like Japanese probably. This has Sailor Moroccan, how many C's? I'm not sure. Mint tea. 1 R, just for Moroccan. There we go. So yeah, I like being able to switch the nibs out between these 3 Pelikans. It's lots of fun. Next up, my TWSBI. So one of my first 5 fountain pens that I gotten once I was fallen down into this rabbit hole of a hobby with all of you people is TWSBI Precision. So it has kind of that gunmetal gray coloring. It's faceted, comes with a steel nib, and I got it in a stub and eventually sold it because I wasn't using the 1.1 stub very much. And it's not recommended to switch the nibs on the Precision. This is a TWSBI Classic in turquoise, and this was passed along to me from another member in the fountain pen community. It was new when I got it, but what I was really excited about at the pen club, I had tried a TWSBI Precision in extra fine and loved the feeling of the nib. So when a member of the fountain pen community through Simone's Discord was offering this up, I was happy to adopt it because it had the extra fine nib and it writes just like I remembered the Precision writing. I'm so thankful to my pen friend who passed this along to me, and there have been many occasions where I've been so impressed with the kindness and generosity of people in this community. So this is the Classic in turquoise, steel nib, extra fine. And do you hear this divine balance of feedback to smoothness? It's really good. And the ink, Pilot Shizuku. I'm blanking. I shot this off camera. Cyro Row. The reverse writing was too dry. So there you have it. It's a classic. Up next is my favorite acquisition of this entire year of 2024. It's an Aurora Optima. And I don't know why it took me so long to try one of these. I think they're not very common to come by, like, to try in the community. And they are more expensive. But I think it's a very attractive pen. What is the star is the nib. This is their anniversary flex nib. So Aurora Optima, which is the flat tops, 88s are the round. This is a numbered edition. This is the Auroraloid, which all their material is. And this is the marbled brown. 365. Has an ink window. This is the most comfortable pen. Really. Flared grip section. So what I like about the anniversary flex nib, beautiful cutout in the shape of the nib, but look how long the tines are. It's actually not particularly flexy, but the writing experience is delightful. So let me show you. Look at that. It's so beautiful. Aurora Optima. Marbled brown. 365. So this is the flex nib, which unmarked comes in 14 karat fine. I've had it ground to an extra fine. I'm not sure if I did the right thing, because the original grind on this was phenomenal, and I enjoy it more as an extra fine, but I'm still not sure if I did the right thing or not. I really don't know, because I don't think, though the extra fine is good on this, even maybe very good, it was a flawless grind. It was just beautiful. So I'm not sure if the trade-off was worth it. Ink. Colorverse. Ginkgo tree. This is another one that is not as obliging. I've flexed it a lot more than this, but again, it's tuned really nicely, and I don't want to not have it tuned very nicely. Let me give you a close-up on this material and all of its splendor. Alright, next, I finally got an Omas. And this is an Omas. It says extra, but it's a Dama, or a lady. So it's the lady sized. It's pretty much a pocket pen. This is scarlet celluloid. And as you can see, this has been scratched up pretty badly. And for those reasons, I got it at a quite approachable price. So it was a good way to get my first Omas. Beautiful nib on that. 18 karat. Fine. So let's do the writing sample. I've come across so many Omases that I so badly wanted to buy, but the price point every time just, it's difficult. So, Omas, extra, Dama, or lady, 18 karat, fine, haven't done a thing to it. Actually, I take that back. When I got it, it was misbehaving, and it got tuned by Kirkspear. Did a great job. It's writing much better. It was skipping and things. I'm not sure if... I think the feed was clogged. And he did disassemble the pen, and I think he took a blade to it to like clean out the feed, if I'm remembering correctly. It's been a bit. Endless Alchemy, Drops of Mars. It's a red writer, and it's a wet ink. It writes really nicely. It's a good balance of feedback and smoothness, I would say. I wish it was an extra fine. I would like it even more. Alright, next we have another Pelikan. And I've been wanting a very vintage Pelikan. Like, I was thinking 50s, but this one is from 1930s. And this is the Pelikan 100. Brown ebonite, even though it looks like black, and green celluloid. And I think the clip and the bands are brass, but I'm not sure, actually. They're cold to the touch, so they're definitely not plastic, but they're not metal because I tried a magnet on them. So, I don't think this has a transparent ink window. Or if it did, it's not anymore. I think it's just ebonite everywhere though, if I'm not mistaken. Lovely nib. It says 14 cat. And it does not say what nib size it is, like the point. Killer, monstrous ebonite feeds on that. Let me show you how she writes. It's a pretty petite pen. Pelikan 100. Green celluloid and extra fine. It's not labeled, but I bought this at the DC pen show and we both agreed this was an extra fine. Really nice writer. I looked at the nib up close under a loop and I'm a little curious about its history, but it's a really responsive nib, so. Isn't that delightful? And I have Pelikan, Edelstein, Olivine in this pen, and it probably will have the ink for the rest of its life with me, at least. Very fine strokes, and it can really lie down a nice line in line variation. So it's really fun pen. Doesn't travel well. Those huge feeds just like drip ink, basically. All right, next tray. We have 3 more fountain pens. Last tray for fountain pens, and then I have a tray of dip nibs to share with you. 3 glass and 2 gold nibbed dip pens, and they're really awesome. I've been really enjoying dip nibs. So let's proceed with our fountain pens. This is, to me, the most beautiful modern pen I have in my collection. And it looks a lot like Arco Celluloid, but it's not. This is the Pineider that I got this year. And I wouldn't have parted with my previous Pineider for anything less than this, because though I didn't find the aesthetic of my previous Pineider to be quite attuned to my favorite aesthetic, the writing experience of that extra fine nib was perfection. So I got this because it's more girthy, it's a lot more to my aesthetic, but that came with some trade-offs. But this is the Antichi Materiali, Ancient Materials. So this was basically, they are saying, celluloid material that was bought for a different industry, for eyeglassware, and then used for making this collection. This is a numbered collection, and the only thing that's not clear is it pure celluloid or is it celluloid with resin? It doesn't specify. If somebody knows, please let me know. Rose gold trim. I love the clip. It's so beautiful. Look at the finial. There's a couple things I don't like about this pen, but I don't feel like talking about them right now. Ink window. Very comfortable pen. Gorgeous nib. I wish this was extra fine, and I wish it wrote exactly like my old one. This one actually writes really well. It's just that it's a fine instead of an extra fine. So pretty. So pretty. Let me show you what it can do on paper. The name of this celluloid or resin, whichever it may be, is Ruffles Gold. It's in a quill nib in fine 14 karat. The ink is Ferris Wheel Press, collab with Wonder Pens, Writing Desk. It's a brown, medium brown, that has a green sheen to it. So, how are we doing here? Let's move up a little bit. Wet pen, no pressure, and no pressure with pressure. Does it reverse? Yeah, reverse nicely. I'd say that's an extra fine. A little bit scratchy, but not too bad at all. It's a delight to write with. Alright, next, my first wooden pen. I've been wanting to get a wood pen for some time. I got this at the Detroit Pen Show. Wancher was there. So this is a Wancher pen. Sandalwood and brass. And it's a cartridge converter. I love the facets. It has 4 facets. And it came with a extra fine steel nib. Now, the thing I really like about this pen is that I did a nib swap. I had this 14 karat vintage fine nib from Omas, and it fits. Of course, the challenge is that this nib is bouncy and flexy, and it doesn't have its ebonite feed as a partner. So of course this plastic feed doesn't really keep up. Often I have to prime it to get it to write properly. All the same, it's fun, and let's see if I can get you a writing sample. I probably will have to prime the feed. We'll see. I did have to prime it. Okay. Wancher. This is called the Densho. 4 facet. Like I said, this came with a steel extra fine nib, and I swapped it with this vintage Omas nib. It's a number 5 nib that I had. And when I bought it at the pen show, my neighbor was Kirk Spear from Pen Realm, and I asked him if he thought it was a friction fit or twist, and he kind of tugged on a bit, and he said, "It's friction, just pull it right out." So that's what I did when I got home. Okay, so then we have this Omas nib. This is from a 555S vintage Omas, and this is a fine nib. Okay, very wet. Of course I did flood or prime it, so that's that. that's without flex. Lovely. Quite certain this is Colorverse Ginkgo Tree also. Now, last one of the tray. This is also a Wancher, and I got this secondhand. I didn't get it at the show. They didn't have it at the show. Don't know why. This is a perfect segue fountain pen into my dip pens, because this is a glass nib fountain pen. It has a cartridge converter on it, and I actually use it as a dip pen, and I liked that it had a cap to protect it for on the go. But I'll show you how it writes. Wancher Shizuku glass nib fountain pen. This I got secondhand, and I believe this is before they were offering nib sizes, so this is a medium, I think. I was very intrigued by this. I liked it for the travel purpose, mostly for dip testing. It's a really smooth glass dip pen, but as with many, if you rotate it around, you'll find there's some spots that are very smooth and others that have more feedback. The really interesting thing about this is I was really curious about what the situation with the feed was. And when I disassembled, or was cleaning this pen, it disassembled and the nib came out. And it's just a glass feed, which is so cool. No plastic in there. So, brass little section there, and it's like a very resilient material. These come in different colors and so on. All right, now we are on to dip pens. Oh, I forgot one. Almost forgot that little guy. Okay, so we're going to go in order of acquisition. And these, I'm going to talk about all 5 and then do the writing sample. That way I don't, just because. So, Hanabi Glass was at Stationery Fest and Hanabi Glass. So this is Colorful Flame. This is representing the flame, and they came in different colors. This one's kind of a violet, and I love it. And I love how girthy and compact this dip nib is. Now, I got it ground to an artist nib. See how it's at a slant? And a very fine point there. So that allows a very broad line and a very fine on the reverse. So I was excited that Lucas did that for me, the maker, and that was really cool. Then I was really excited about his glass dip pens, and I thought I should have gotten more than one. I should have gotten one in like a very fine point also. And this one came available secondhand by chance. So I picked this one up, and it has a totally different aesthetic, which is fine. It's actually surprisingly comfortable, and this has, I'd say, like a fine nib on it. I wish it was even finer, but yeah, it's really cool. Next, I got these at the Ohio Pen Show. These are vintage dip pens, mother of pearl handles, and then a gold nib. And they're very bouncy and very responsive. And they're both a little bit different. One's finer and bouncier, and the other one gives a little bit more of a broad line and is still responsive, but not as much. And then this is the new Dominant Industries muddler, which I just think is very cute, and it goes in my Go pack for swatching, because it's like very mini, very small. So we're going to swatch these, and I'll just talk a little bit about what I have on my desk here before I do that. So I've spoken about this is my 5 pen rest made of Purpleheart in the Jewel collection, made of handmade by myself. Then we have some Ferris wheel press inks. We've actually begun to retail Ferris wheel press inks and accessories on our Fountain Pendulum web store, so check it out. This is one of my these are 2 of my favorite inks from Ferris wheel press this year. So Age of Aurum. It has shimmer, and I love using shimmer with dip nibs because I don't use them in my fountain pens, so this is my chance to go crazy. And I made this little holder for it. We have this ink available on our web store. And then Adventurine, another shimmer. This is a chromo shader also. And they came out with these beautiful stands. It's supposed to be like a globe. And it'll hold it upright when you're inking, and then it'll tilt also in case your ink is getting low. So those are awesome. We have those on our web shop as well. And now my inks are shaken. I'll shake them again before I dip, but we're going to go through each of these in writing samples. Let's get to it. Alright, I'm going to start with the Ferris wheel press Adventurine. I'll give it a good shake. And I'll start with the Hanabi Glass Colorful Flame dip pen. So here is on the broad stroke Hanabi Glass. So that's the broad stroke, and then I flip it over for the fine. Let me get a little more ink. And it writes very fine. Broad and fine. The thing I really like about dip nibs is they're so easy to clean for swatching, for using shimmer inks if you want to write cards and things like that. So I really enjoy it. This is Hanabi Glass dip nib. I thought this was a medium, or no, I said fine. Yeah, I think it's a fine. Maybe it's actually quite fine on this paper. So this is for both of them. This is the Ferris wheel press Adventurine, and you can see there there's kind of a silver with a rose gold shimmer, and it has some chroma shading with like blue. It's really pretty in a swatch especially. So this is Age of Aurum. It's a shimmer ink as well, very beautiful. And Ferris wheel press just started offering these 10 mil glass vials. And I love sample inks and smaller bottles of ink, so this is right up my alley. Okay, this is the finer of the gold vintage dip nibs and more flexy. So we'll just write here vintage gold dip nib, and you can see the fine strokes it's capable of, and then I'll do some flexing. Isn't that lovely? I don't make them like that anymore. I'll show you up close. I think I showed you already, but this kind of has little barbs on it. Okay, this next one we'll do the same ink. I'll write it out this time. This is the one that I find usually writes a little bit more broad and is less flexy. And we're using Ferris wheel press Age of Aurum. It's a beautiful gold with gold shimmer, kind of goldish brass color. And this one has a different pattern on it, different make altogether. Still the mother of pearl. And my last one is this little Dominant Industry ink muddler. So there's a muddle end and then the glass dip end. It's very small, but I like it for having as like a travel glass nib pen also. And they're very economical, so if something were to happen to it, I wouldn't be brokenhearted. So let's start by just writing with it, then we'll do, it has these pretty extensive kind of glass feed basically to hold a nice amount of ink. So Dominant Industry is coming out with some cool stuff. Ink muddler. This is more like a medium and gets finer. It kind of had an ink dump at first there, so that was like a broad, now it's like a medium, I would say. So I'll do the ink Ferris. This is very approachable. I have to keep rotating it. In price, it's short, so you know, won't fit everybody's hand. And you know, being at the more entry-level glass pen, it's definitely more feedbacky, at least mine is. Some people have said theirs was very smooth, but this is kind of subjective, right? Okay, let's try the muddler end. Oh yeah, I forgot. Okay, so you should rinse this part before just grabbing it, because it's so short that you don't really have room to hold much. There, pocket-sized fun. I would like to thank you for joining and for watching. Thanks to everyone who likes and subscribes to the channel. It's a tremendous support. I would say also, if you haven't checked out my fountain pendulum web store with my handmade wood desk accessories, do check it out if that's something you're interested in. I also make a lot of ink accessories for ink samples and bottle holders and things like that, and various types of pen rests. So take a look if you're interested. But I'll thank you so much again for watching, and wishing you a happy end of 2024 and a happy new year for 2025. I'm looking forward to making more content in the year to come, and I have some anticipation for some really exciting fountain pens next year, hopefully also. It's all up to you now.